Most people move toward light. They want to be noticed. They want to be heard. They want to feel important in the eyes of others. He moved in the opposite direction, not because he disliked people, not because he hated life, but because he felt something changing inside him. He sensed that his heart was slowly becoming attached to being seen. Even small praise began to feel sweet. Even silent approval from others began to matter more than it should. That frightened him. The world is loud. It constantly pulls at your attention. It tells you to build your name, protect your image, defend your reputation. And without realizing it, your heart starts living for those things. He understood a simple truth. Allah speaks softly to the heart, and if the heart is full of noise, it cannot hear him. So he stepped away. 40 years in darkness was not an act of extreme isolation, it was an act of protection. He was protecting his sincerity, protecting his intention, protecting the fragile purity of his worship. He chose to remove the distractions before they removed his focus on Allah. There are moments in every believer's life when this decision appears. A choice between attention and intimacy, between being known by people or being close to Allah. Sometimes nearness requires distance from what weakens you. Sometimes growth requires stepping back from what feeds your ego. He walked away from the world, not to escape it, but to return to Allah with a heart that was no longer divided. When no human eyes could see him, his worship became pure fire. There is something inside the human heart that longs to be seen. Even when you do good, even when you pray, even when you give charity, a small part of you hopes someone notices. A quiet desire to be acknowledged can mix itself into even the most beautiful acts. He understood this weakness deeply, so he chose to remove every human eye from his worship. In complete darkness, no one could admire his tears. No one could measure how long he stood in prayer. No one could whisper, "He is righteous." At first, the silence was heavy. The ego does not disappear easily. It resists being ignored. It resists being forgotten. But day after day, year after year, something began to burn inside him. When no one is watching, your intentions become clear. There is no performance left, no adjustment of tone, no subtle display of spirituality. Only you and Allah. His prayer became different in that darkness. It became intense, focused, honest. There was no audience to impress, only a Lord to please. Hidden worship purifies like fire. It melts pride. It exposes weakness. It forces the heart to confront its true motives. And when the need to be seen fades away, something stronger replaces it, a deep, steady sincerity. He learned that when people are removed, Allah becomes enough. And when Allah is enough, the worship that rises from your heart carries a power that no applause can ever produce. He buried his ego in the darkness until only sincerity remained. The greatest enemy he faced was not outside that room, it was inside his chest. The ego is subtle. It does not always demand loud praise. Sometimes it only asks for small recognition, a quiet appreciation, a feeling of being special. In the darkness, there was no mirror. He could not see his own posture in prayer. He could not admire the image of himself as a devoted servant. Even the smallest forms of self-admiration were removed. That was not accidental. He understood that the ego feeds on visibility. It grows stronger when it is seen. It becomes powerful when it is admired. So he starved it. For years he prayed where no one would speak his name. He worshipped where no one would tell his story. He trained his heart to do good without expecting any return from people. The first stage was painful. When you remove recognition, the heart feels empty. The ego begins to whisper that the effort is wasted. It suggests that perhaps someone should at least know. But he did not listen. He remained in that darkness long enough for the whispers to weaken, long enough for the desire to be known to lose its strength, long enough for sincerity to take root. In Sufi understanding, the nafs does not disappear quickly. It is disciplined slowly. It is humbled gently but firmly. Year after year, he learned to pray without imagining how he looked. He learned to give without thinking of his reputation. He learned to weep without wishing anyone could hear it. And in that hidden struggle, something beautiful happened. The ego became smaller, not destroyed, but controlled, not erased, but humbled. What remained was a simple intention. Allah deserves to be worshipped. That was enough. When sincerity becomes stronger than the need to be seen, a servant becomes light, not because people praise him, but because his heart is no longer divided. In complete darkness, Allah taught him how to see with his soul. After many years in darkness, something unexpected began to grow. At first, he entered that space to escape distraction. But over time, the darkness itself became a teacher. When the eyes cannot rely on light, other senses awaken. You listen more carefully. You become aware of small movements. You begin to notice what you once ignored. Spiritually, the same principle applies. When the outer world becomes quiet, the inner world becomes louder. In that darkness, he began to notice his intentions more clearly. He could sense when pride entered his heart. He could feel when distraction tried to pull him away. Without external noise, every internal shift became visible to him. Allah was not depriving him of light. Allah was refining his perception. There is a kind of sight that comes from the eyes, and there is a kind that comes from the heart. The sight of the eyes depends on brightness. The sight of the heart depends on clarity. Years of hidden prayer sharpened his inner clarity. He began to see his weaknesses without denial. He began to understand his dependence on Allah more deeply. He began to recognize how fragile he truly was. And with that recognition came humility. Darkness taught him patience. It taught him trust. It taught him to rely on Allah without visible proof. Sometimes when Allah removes clear signs from your life, it is not abandonment. It is training. It is an invitation to depend on Him beyond what you can see. He stayed in that training long enough for his heart to mature. When he finally stepped back into the light of the world, he was not overwhelmed by it. His inner vision was stronger than external brightness. Because when a person learns to see with the soul, the darkness no longer frightens them. It becomes a place of growth. The longer he was forgotten by people, the closer he was drawn to the throne. Being forgotten is one of the hardest tests for the human heart. To live in a world that celebrates visibility and then choose obscurity feels unnatural. The soul often wants reassurance. It wants to feel valued. It wants its existence to matter in the eyes of others. He accepted the opposite. As the years passed, his name faded from gatherings. People stopped mentioning him. New faces replaced old ones. The world continued without him, and something inside him began to feel lighter. At first, being forgotten is painful. The ego feels rejected. It whispers that your absence proves your insignificance. It tells you that if no one remembers you, you must not matter. But he learned a deeper truth. When creation forgets you, you are freed from serving their expectations. He no longer carried the burden of reputation. He no longer adjusted his actions to protect how people saw him. He no longer worried about maintaining an image. He became simple. In that simplicity, his heart began to draw closer to Allah in a way that would not have been possible if he were constantly observed. Because when you are seen by people, you subconsciously perform. When you are unseen, you become honest. Every tear he shed in darkness rose directly to Allah. Every prostration was witnessed by the one whose sight never fades. Every whisper of dhikr carried no trace of display. And slowly, the distance between him and his Lord became smaller. The Sufi masters teach that true elevation often looks like disappearance, that nearness often comes through humility, that the path to the throne is not built through fame, but through sincerity. As he became forgotten among people, he became known in the unseen realm. He did not seek status. He did not chase titles. But Allah raised him quietly. This is the secret most people never understand. When you stop living for the recognition of creation, your heart becomes available for the love of the Creator. He no longer needed to be remembered, because he felt held. He no longer needed his name spoken, because he felt known. And there is a difference between being famous and being known by Allah. Fame depends on people. Being known by Allah depends on sincerity. The longer he remained hidden, the closer he felt to the throne. Not physically, but spiritually. His dependence deepened, his trust strengthened, his fear softened into love. The world may have forgotten him, but he had found something greater than remembrance. He had found closeness. The darkness did not break him. It rebuilt him into a secret friend of Allah. 40 years in darkness would break most people. Isolation weakens those who depend on noise. Silence unsettles those who rely on distraction. When there is no applause, no audience, no validation, the heart is forced to face itself. He stayed. At first, the darkness exposed everything inside him. Old desires, hidden pride, fear of being forgotten, the quiet need to matter in the eyes of others. All of it surfaced. And instead of running from it, he confronted it. Day after day, year after year, the darkness stripped him. It removed illusions. It removed false confidence. It removed the subtle belief that he was already spiritually strong. He began to see how fragile he truly was. That realization did not destroy him. It humbled him, and humility is the foundation of closeness to Allah. The darkness did not shrink his faith. It deepened it. When there were no visible signs of progress, he learned patience. When there were no emotional highs, he learned consistency. When there were no witnesses, he learned sincerity. He stopped worshipping for feeling. He worshipped out of loyalty. Slowly, the fear inside him transformed into trust. The restlessness transformed into contentment. The loneliness transformed into intimacy with Allah. He no longer felt alone in that small, dark space. He felt accompanied, not by people, but by the awareness that Allah was near. This is the hidden transformation of the sincere servant. The world may see isolation, but internally, a rebuilding is taking place. The darkness rebuilt his priorities. It rebuilt his intentions. It rebuilt his understanding of what truly matters. When he finally returned more openly among people, he was not the same man who had entered that darkness decades earlier. He was calmer, softer, more grounded. He did not need attention to feel secure. He did not need recognition to feel valuable. His worth was no longer measured by how he appeared to others. He had become steady. This is what spiritual rebuilding looks like. It is not dramatic. It is not loud. It is slow, quiet, and firm. The darkness did not crush him. It forged him. And those who are forged in solitude carry a strength that cannot be shaken by public opinion. He became what the Sufis call a hidden friend of Allah, not because he performed miracles, not because he gained followers, but because his heart had been rebuilt in secrecy. A heart rebuilt by Allah does not need to defend itself. It rests, and in that rest there is power. After 40 years of hidden worship, his light could no longer be contained. There is a kind of light that people create for themselves. It shines when others are watching. It grows when praise increases. It survives as long as attention continues. And then there is another kind of light, a light that is built slowly, quietly, in places where no one is looking. For 40 years, his worship remained hidden. No one documented it. No one celebrated it. No one spoke about it in gatherings. But Allah saw every moment, every tear that fell in darkness, every prostration pressed into cold ground, every whispered remembrance spoken when no one else could hear. Nothing was wasted. When he finally stepped back into the open world, something was different about him. He did not try to impress anyone. He did not try to speak more than necessary. He did not try to appear spiritual. Yet people felt something. There was a calm around him that could not be explained, a steadiness that did not depend on circumstance, a humility that felt genuine, not performed. This is what happens when light is grown in darkness. It becomes stable. It does not flicker when opinions change. It does not dim when criticism appears. It does not grow brighter when praise increases. It remains, because its source is not people. Its source is Allah. He no longer feared being seen because he was no longer attached to being seen. He no longer feared being forgotten because he had already learned how to live without recognition. The darkness had freed him from needing approval, freed him from defending his reputation, freed him from chasing importance. And when a person becomes free from these chains, their presence carries weight. He did not seek influence. Influence came to him. He did not demand respect. Respect settled naturally around him, not because he wanted it, but because sincerity leaves a trace. People can sense when someone has been alone with Allah for a long time. There is a softness in their speech, a patience in their reactions, a quiet strength in their silence. That kind of light cannot be manufactured. It can only be formed through hidden struggle. If you are in a season where you feel unseen, overlooked, or forgotten, understand this carefully. Darkness does not always mean absence. Sometimes it means preparation. Sometimes Allah hides you from people so that He can shape you without interruption, so that your light grows strong enough to survive when it is finally exposed. 40 years of hidden worship were not lost years. They were the foundation. And when the foundation is built deeply, the structure above it stands firm. His light could no longer be contained because it was not dependent on the world to sustain it. It was anchored in something eternal. And when light is anchored in Allah, no darkness can overpower it. There is something most people never understand about spiritual light. If you build it in public, you must maintain it in public. If you build it on reputation, you must protect that reputation. If you build it on praise, you must constantly chase more praise. But when light is born in darkness, it does not belong to you. It belongs to Allah. For 40 years, he did not know if anyone would ever hear his story. He did not know if anyone would ever speak his name again. He did not know if his isolation would be remembered or erased. He did not stay for legacy. He stayed for Allah. That is the difference. When he finally returned to the world, he did not carry pride in his sacrifice. He did not speak about the years he endured. He did not measure himself against others. Because the darkness had emptied him of comparison, he had nothing left to prove. That is why his presence felt heavy. Not heavy with arrogance, but heavy with sincerity. People felt safe around him. Not because he entertained them, but because he was not competing with them. He had already conquered the need to be greater than anyone else. This is what happens when the ego is disciplined for decades. The heart becomes soft. The reactions become slower. The anger becomes weaker. The patience becomes stronger. He no longer reacted from insecurity. He responded from certainty. And certainty built in secrecy cannot be shaken easily. The world may praise you today and criticize you tomorrow. It may lift you and then ignore you. It may celebrate you and then forget you. But when your identity is anchored in Allah, those waves lose their power. He had learned how to stand alone with Allah for 40 years, so standing in front of people did not intimidate him. He had learned how to worship without witnesses, so being witnessed did not corrupt him. He had learned how to live without recognition, so recognition did not intoxicate him. This is the kind of light that cannot be contained. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is steady. And steady light outlasts flashes of brightness. If you feel hidden right now, do not rush to escape it. If your efforts feel unseen, do not assume they are wasted. If your path feels quiet, do not think it lacks value. Some lights are not meant to shine immediately. They are meant to mature. They are meant to grow roots deep enough to survive storms. 40 years in darkness were not about isolation. They were about purification. And when Allah decides to reveal a servant whose heart has been purified in secrecy, no barrier can stop that light from spreading. Not because the servant wants it, but because Allah wills it. The light that is born in darkness is not fragile. It is faithful, and when it finally appears, it does not seek attention. It simply shines.